Memories told by Gladys Peterson.
Betsy wanted me to say something about my mother and dad when they came over from Sweden. Now, my dad came over at the age of 20 to escape the draft in Sweden. He was the youngest of all the children, and then he wanted to escape the draft, and then he wanted also for, I think, religious reasons, he wanted to come over to America. And he didn't plan to stay in America. He thought he would work over here a couple of years and then go back to his mother and dad. But he had a bad accident in Sheffield, Pennsylvania, where he was working in a sawmill, and he didn't have, and all the money that he had saved up in the sawmill was used to pay for his accident. So consequently, he didn't get to go back to Sweden until after he was married and many years later on. But he came over here from Gothenburg on August 1903, and he arrived in Boston on the boat Ivernia, and he declared his intention to become a citizen in 1906 at Coudersport, Pennsylvania. But when he came to Boston, then they came to New York City, and there, while he was at the train station, he bought what he thought was a bag of apples. But instead, when he bit into it, the juice came all the way down his face, and he discovered that it wasn't apples at all, it was tomatoes, and he just threw the bag. Now, my mother, Dad came over at the age of 20, and he settled in Sheffield, Pennsylvania, and worked in a lumber yard there for a while, and then he went and opened up a restaurant and did different things before coming to Jamestown and becoming a meat cutter and owned his own meat business. My mother was the oldest of 6 or 7 children, and she came over at the age of 17. I think mainly because they were poor, and with many younger children in the family, I think her mother thought that the opportunities would be greater in the United States. So there was a missionary or a minister that was coming over to the United States, and my grandmother asked him if my mother could come over with him. So at the age of 17, she signed a contract, and she left Gothenburg, Sweden. She traveled by steamer to Hull, England, and within 48 hours, and from there traveled by train to Liverpool, third class, and from there took an ocean steamer to Boston, which would take 12 days, and from there by rail to Worcester, Massachusetts, where she picked up a train to come to Jamestown, New York. Now, this was quite an adventure for someone who knew nobody in Jamestown. And being only 17 years old, she could not speak the language. But in Jamestown, the Swedes that had come before in Jamestown, the churches would meet the people at the railroad station and greet the immigrants that were coming in, and they could speak Swedish. And so they would help them. The minister from in our case, the Swedish Baptist Church, would meet the young people, and then they would help them get domestic help in the homes. So my mother became a cook and a maid in one of the wealthier homes in Jamestown, and that was their lot. And she would save like 25 cents out of her pay every week, hoping that someday she would be able to go back to Sweden. But then circumstances arose that she lost that money that she had saved, and she never got back to Sweden. And her mother and sisters and brothers all came over here to America once she settled here. So it's kind of hard to think that here she knew nobody. All her family was over in Sweden, and she was trying to, she must have been very homesick. I can't imagine it, but anyways, but then she met my dad, and so we're thankful that they met and had a good life together, and had 6 children. Okay, this is a picture of my mother right before she left for United States. And this is her mother and dad, and then all her brothers and sisters. So you can imagine how hard it was for her to leave her family and come to the United States, leaving all her loved ones behind. And this is my mother when she came to the United States at a young age before she got married, and working as a domestic in Jamestown. And this would be a picture of my dad at about the age that he came over to the United States. And he was born in this house. It was sort of a 2-room house, and when we were in Sweden a few years ago, fortunately, one of my cousins was still living there, so we were able to go through the house. And and this back here is the slaughterhouse where they used to slaughter the animals, and I think this is why my dad got into the meat business, because he did do that on the farm in the Sweden. And this house is called Lyckan, and Lyckan means good luck. And I think it's kind of interesting, the painting that we have here. When you go over to Sweden, you always get kaffe and bullar, which is coffee and rolls. So here this lady is bringing out rolls for us to have. And this is the Swedish flag, and this is the maypole. And in June, everybody celebrates midsummer, and they dance around the maypole. And this is typical of the fences that they had in Sweden years ago. And of course, in Sweden, you always have lots of lakes and woods. And so that is the home that my dad lived in, and that he left when he came over to America. This is my mother's leaving paper, they called it, when she left Sweden. And it says here that it was Edith Alfield Eriksson, and that she was the daughter of carpenter Per Alfred Eriksson from Smedjebacken, and that she was from the Tillberger parish in Västmanland, and that she was vaccinated, they had that on there, and that she was baptized or christened, and she was not confirmed in a Swedish church, they put that there, and she is a good citizen and eligible for marriage, and she was moving to the United States via the Norrbarker. So I think that's, and it gives the date here, May 3rd, 1902. So that is her leaving paper that she had to carry with her to come to America.
This is an old chest from Sweden that the Swedish immigrants could have brought over with them from Sweden to America on their trip over. This is the inside of it with the designs that would have been in there.